Hello, we have with us today Mr. Matthias Karton, Chief Executive Officer of the German Maritime Center in Hamburg, Germany. We also have Mr. Arjun Chaugule, the Executive Director of the Chaugule Company and President of the Shipyards Association of India. Welcome to this podcast, both of you.
Thank you.
So we are here to discuss a little bit about the EU-India trade pact. The maritime domain is central to the growing partnership between the European Union and India. With negotiations driving towards a free trade agreement, both sides see opportunities to deepen the economic ties through ports, shipping, and logistics, while supporting supply chain diversification and resilience across the Indo-Pacific. Now, if I can start with a simple question, how could a future EU-India free trade agreement transform maritime trade flows, port development, and logistics connectivity? Can we start with you, Mr. Matthias?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me say that I very much hope that we will get to such a free trade agreement in the near future. As you know, it's being negotiated right now, so we still don't know whether in the end it'll work out. These free trade agreements, they are always tricky, and in the end it's always relatively small sectors of the industry that put up, for whatever reasons, their defenses. I think when it comes to the maritime sector, that is not even so much of an issue. So I think they're discussing other things right now, in particular in the agricultural sector. Now, if it comes to fruition, I think it'll be a major boost both for the European Union and for India in the economy as a whole. Now, when it comes to shipbuilding and shipping operations, well, there's two things. There's a direct effect and an indirect effect. And the direct effect, of course, is that it'll give a boost to, for example, shipbuilding. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more in this show. So that's the direct effect. But there's obviously also an indirect effect, because if overall trade goes up, so goes the need for more ports, more port operations, more ships, more shipping lines between Europe and India. So I think the direct effect is important, but the indirect effect through such an FTA agreement is probably even more important.
Well, since you mentioned that there is huge scope for shipbuilding, I'd like to just ask Mr. Chaugule, what is the scope for collaboration in shipbuilding or ship repairs, maritime technology, if this pact comes through?
Yeah, I mean, look, this pact is extremely important because across various sectors, not just in shipbuilding and maritime, but if I was to look at only in shipbuilding, today where we find ourselves in terms of, I think also in light of the announcements that have been made by the government of India and in terms of the impetus that they want to give to the sector, Europe's strengths are India's weaknesses. India's strengths are Europe's weaknesses today. And it allows us to counterbalance each other, collaborate, and really then through partnerships really be very strong players in the world. Because Europe, when it comes to maritime trade, has an extremely, I would say, probably one of the best in the world when it comes to the knowledge. The knowledge ecosystem in Europe is unparalleled, in terms of design, in terms of equipments, in terms of the new technologies that are going into what we would say are future-ready ships which have lower emissions to combat climate change. Europe really is at the forefront of that. On the other side, though, they do lack manufacturing capacity, and they definitely lack manufacturing capacity to scale, which India does have. And India's ambition is to, again, rebalance its economy towards, from a services-oriented economy where we find ourselves today, towards a manufacturing-led economy. But when we are manufacturing, we want to manufacture for the world. We don't just want to manufacture for India. So we are moving towards export-led manufacturing, industrialization, and therefore you have to be at the forefront of technology. So this collaboration can really help both sides in the sense of really utilizing what Europe is really strong at and leveraging on what India is aspiring to be.
So what we are saying is Europe is stronger with technology and we are stronger with manufacturing base.
Well, fundamentally Europe is very good at conceptualizing, designing, and understanding the fundamentals. India is setting itself up to really be the ones to execute. Okay. Europe is not ready to execute. I mean, I think from a cost competitiveness perspective, there are challenges there. There's a demographic challenge as well in Europe. India doesn't have that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, of course, like everything, it's a simplification, but I think it's a valid point, and especially in shipbuilding, when it comes to, for example, large container vessels, scaling is fundamental. And that's also one of the reasons why we're seeing so much concentration right now in China when it comes to shipbuilding. And that, by the way, is something that I think nobody really wants. We've had discussions here earlier today at the conference about this as well, is that it can be in nobody's interest to have any vital part of the production chain monopolized in any one country. And also from that perspective, I think we would all benefit, or the world would benefit, from having a vital shipbuilding industry in India.
What do both of you think about knowledge sharing? Because India would expect some technical knowledge transfer. Is Europe ready to share their technical knowledge, or do you expect challenges there?
Well, I mean, in the end, Europe or European countries, they're rule-based democracies. So these are not things that are decided on the government level, unlike in authoritarian countries, unlike, for example, in China. So this, in the end, will depend on the individual companies. If they see a market opportunity to, for example, co-produce with an Indian company or opening up a production site in India, and that means sharing some patents or some technology, they will do it. And I think that's also good because, generally speaking, I believe in free trade. I believe in the benefits of having an open economy. So I think that would be good. Now, how that will come about will depend on as I said, on the individual companies to figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, I think just one more point to add on this.
Please.
We've spoken about, when we talk about free trade, we talk about the exchange of goods and services, manufacturing, we talk about knowledge and the intellectual property. And of course, but the thing that we've not touched upon, and which is also very important, is capital. And is the interplay between the knowledge, the manufacturing expertise, and the capital that will play a role. And traditionally, it was always expected that capital would come in from Europe to India.
Yeah.
But the way we're seeing it, particularly in these industries now, a lot of the capital is going to be coming in from India because Indian companies are raising capital from global sources, and then have the opportunities to deploy in maybe in R&D in Europe because you have a very strong talent pool over there, and also in manufacturing capacities at scale and speciality in India.
And let me also point out something else, because I think that's important in this discussion, is it will not be, at least when, in my opinion, be in a way that the technology, so the brain is in Europe and the hands are in India. So I think that's an old view of how the world works, in particular when it comes to India. And of course, you're right. There are certain areas in shipbuilding where absolutely European companies are ahead of Indians by far. But let's talk about digitalization, and that's also important in shipbuilding and in ship operations. And that is an area, depending on what fields we talk about, where India is arguably far ahead of some European countries. So I think it's going to be much more nuanced in the ways of give and take. So it's not just going to be the technology and the capital come from Europe, and here is the cheap labor and they kind of execute it. It's going to be much more dual in certain ways, to the point where Indian companies will invest in German companies in Indian. And I think that's also the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're talking about technology, manufacture, capital, etc. But there's something called skills mobility also. That's a big issue being talked about. We observed that there are countries like Norway and Germany which are approaching India for skilled manpower, skilled hands, that they can be trained and put to work in European countries. What do you think this free trade agreement will also facilitate such skill transfer?
Well, I'm not sure if I don't think that the free trade agreement would encompass mobility of labor. So I think that's out of the question. That's what we have within the European Union, where there's freedom of movement, so any European Union citizen can work in any other country without any restrictions, basically. I don't think that will happen in a free trade agreement. Now, separately from the free trade agreement, there is a number of initiatives in Germany, but also other European countries, to attract, in particular, Indian skilled workforce in a variety of areas, ranging from healthcare to manufacturing and so on and so forth. So you alluded to that, Arjun, as well. We're in very, very different demographic situations. European countries are aging, shrinking societies. India is a growing, very young society. So we have the opposite problems, in fact. So there's a shortage of skilled labor in Europe, and there is an abundance of labor in India, where people, my Indian friends tell me that even with very, very healthy growth rates of 6-7%, the Indian labor market is not able to absorb the entire generations of new people coming into the workforce. So that seems to be like a win-win situation. And now, of course, immigration in Europe, as almost everywhere in the world, is also very sensitive. Let me put it that way. I think we need it, but it's sometimes a tough sell politically to the local population. But we need it. So what we'll have is basically two things: is that we'll address the labor shortage partially by importing workforce, for example, from India, and partially also by outsourcing certain production to, for example, India, which from an economic perspective is the same, right? So either you move the production facility or you move the people. So at the end, that is basically the same, right, from an economic perspective.
No, I mean, I think Matthias has said it the right way. There is the immigration challenge, and I think the more reasonable way forward would be to just import either components or products in rather than the people. However, in India, we always have the issue of we just can't find the right people, and of course, skilling plays a big role in that. So from India's perspective, would we like to see our best minds and hands go outside India? The answer is from the industry perspective, no. We would like them to be here because they can contribute to the development within the country. But it's and it takes. See, you can deploy a lot of capital in these industries, and to deploy capital, the time lag is not that large. But to skill a generation of people takes a long time.
Very long.
So. The deployment of capital on its own is not the only challenge. You have to also solve the challenge of how do you really get the right type of skills coming in.
So we go back away from the people, go back to one of the key aspects for any of these trade pacts is nowadays, especially in the current context, is to ensure that there is diversification of supply chain, sustainability of the supply chain. In what way do you think that this EU and India free trade agreement would help in this factor?
Well, I mean, I can say this for all shipbuilding in India. Today, Indian shipyards primarily purchase components and equipments from Europe. And I would say both for Europe and India, our biggest risk is the reliability of the supply chain, and then subsequently the cost competitiveness of that supply chain. So that's what I said in the beginning. Europe's weakness is really what India's strength is.
That's interesting. You mentioned that most of it is supplied by Europe.
Because Indians trust European companies. No, that's true. We like working with European companies. I'm glad to hear these are components that require a lot of integration. You don't just import components in and then put them on, and it's very easy to put it on a ship. They have to be fully integrated with many other components.
What happens in the current development that, the ships are no longer mechanical and electrical. They require rare earth elements. They require certain elements which are not abundantly available in Europe or in India. And the world is dependent on some difficult parts of the region. So do you think this will help in kind of addressing that to some extent?
Well, look, you can't take away the fact that the world, when it comes to goods and products, is reliant on China. You can't take away that fact. I mean, that's a reality we have to live with, and it's something that we do want to reduce our dependency. We have to work towards it. But there are steps to work towards that as well now. And we have to get there. But I think the free trade agreement is really a very important step towards moving towards that direction. Because I think these are, for all practical purposes today, in today's world, the European mindset and the Indian mindset, there is a merger over there in terms of just being able to understand each other from a mindset perspective and how companies should operate.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've learned the hard way that it's not good to rely on any one country for a particular thing. We've learned this, Europeans and Germans in particular, we've learned this with Russia when it came to energy. We're learning it when it comes to China, currently with the rare earth and critical minerals discussion. And obviously shipping is also an area that could be critical. So I think diversification absolutely makes sense. And I think there's another differentiator is that both the European Union countries and India are large, stable democracies, countries or regions that are or operate on a rules-based principle. And that, of course, is quite a difference to an authoritarian system that is, at the whims, essentially, of one person at the top. Now, we've also seen that some things can change. We're all watching in awe what's happening in the United States, so that even countries that at least Europeans considered unshakable allies suddenly change for whatever reasons. So I think the lesson is never take anything for granted. And the more diverse you are with your supply chains, etc., the better you will be off in the eventual case that something goes wrong.
So I think to just go towards concluding this session, you're heading a think tank. What is your prognosis on this free trade coming?
So now I have to get my crystal ball out.
Yes.
As I said earlier, I do hope that it will come to fruition because I think it'll be beneficial for Europe and it'll be beneficial for India. So therefore, because my heart lies in it, I predict that it will come.
It will come.
So I hope that's not just wishful thinking, but that's what I'm going to predict.
And I'm sure you think so too.
Well, look, there's already a large degree of collaboration happening in our sector. I think that it makes a lot of sense at the macro level for both regions to work together towards making this happen. I hope it from a general economic development perspective of India, but already in our sector it's happening.
It's happening. So on that positive note, we will hope for the best, and maybe sooner than later, the pact will be materialized. And thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.